I sank into the chair next to them, crossing my legs, my fingers lightly grazing the edge of my glass. Their movements came together slowly at first, uncertain. Then they found a rhythm. She gasped, his hands guiding her with a gentle, deliberate touch. I exhaled, warmth spreading through me as I watched. I had planned to remain a bystander, but the longer I stayed, the harder it became to resist. Before we continue, please hit the like button and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow. And if you already have, thank you for being here. Now, let's get started. I swear I can't even recall the last time I was with a man. She sighed, sinking deeper into the couch. I laughed, swirling my wine. That's truly sad, I replied. She groaned, agreeing. It is. It's been months, maybe even a year. I shook my head. That couldn't be me. I don't think I could go a week without jumping my husband. She rolled her eyes. Yeah, we get it. You won the husband lottery. I smirked. I did, though. The man knows exactly how to handle a woman. She exhaled deeply. Must be nice. I tilted my head, studying her. She looked exhausted, not just tired, but empty. Maybe she missed companionship, but I suspected this was about something more physical. Maybe that's the issue, I mused. She frowned. What problem? I leaned in a little. You think you're feeling this way because of your divorce, but maybe you just need a man who knows what he's doing. Her head snapped up, her eyes widening. Excuse me? I just smiled and took another sip. I mean, you wouldn't have to look far. She blinked. What does that mean? I let the silence stretch before speaking. What if I lent you mine? Her breath caught. You're kidding. I just kept smiling. Later that day, we were tangled in bed, skin damp, bodies humming with afterglow. I stretched, running lazy fingers over his chest, still basking in the satisfaction only he could give me. That was incredible, I murmured. He smirked, eyes half-lidded as always. I let the silence linger, letting the warmth settle between us. Then, casually, I said, She needs this. His brow furrowed. Who? My friend, I said, propping myself up on one elbow. She's miserable and lonely. I think she just needs to feel wanted again. He frowned slightly, still confused. I ran my nails over his stomach, feeling his breath catch. And maybe you could help. His body tensed. Wait, you're serious? I nodded. She needs this, and you know exactly how to make a woman feel good. He exhaled, rubbing a hand over his face. I don't know. I leaned in, pressing my lips to his jaw. I'd be there, watching, guiding. His breath wavered. I could feel his hesitation, but also curiosity. You trust me, don't you? I whispered. His fingers twitched at my waist, tightening just a little. I could tell I had him. The next morning, I poured coffee as my husband walked into the kitchen, still groggy. We should invite her over, I said, handing him a mug. He frowned. 4? I met his gaze. To talk. He hesitated. And by talk, you mean? I smirked. You'll see. A pause. He exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. But he didn't say no. That was enough. I sent the text, and she responded almost instantly. Sure, I could use the company. When she arrived, she looked drained, like she hadn't fully shaken off whatever weight she was carrying. But her eyes were clearer, more curious. We sat down, coffee in hand, and I let the moment settle before tilting my head. Been thinking about what we talked about. She gave me a long glance. Maybe, I smiled, and she sighed. I mean, I get what you were saying, but it's not exactly easy to just. She gestured vaguely. I leaned in slightly. What if it was? Her brows furrowed. What do you mean? I reached for my husband's wrist, running my fingers over his skin. Her eyes flickered between us. We want to help, I murmured. Silence. She blinked. You're serious? I nodded. She swallowed, her gaze shifting between me and him, searching for something. I held her stare. You trust me, don't you? A long pause. Then finally, she set her coffee down. What exactly are you suggesting? I smiled. Let me show you. I led them into the bedroom, my breath steady, pulse a slow thrum beneath my skin. But inside, I was burning. She followed cautiously, her movements careful and uncertain. My husband, on the other hand, walked in with quiet tension, like he was still processing what was about to happen. I knew exactly what I was doing. I turned to him first, trailing my fingers down his chest, peeling away his shirt with deliberate ease. His breathing deepened, his muscles flexing slightly under my touch. Then I faced her. She stood still, caught between anticipation and hesitation, lips parted as if waiting for permission. I smiled, sliding my hands over her shoulders, teasing the fabric of her top. She didn't pull away, so I took my time. The first piece of clothing hit the floor, then another. The air felt heavier. My husband reached for her, his hands moving slowly, deliberately. His hesitation remained, but his touch was steady. She exhaled shakily, sinking into his warmth, letting him guide her. I stepped back, lowering myself onto the chair beside the bed, watching, taking in the way his hands explored her, the way she responded, the quiet gasps slipping past her lips. I crossed my legs, the pressure sending a pulse of heat through me. This was what I wanted, to see him like this, to see her like this, to feel the tension coil tighter, hotter as I watched. His lips found her neck, tracing lower, his hands mapping her curves. She arched under him, her body responding to every touch, every slow movement. I shifted, pressing my thighs together as warmth spread through me. My breath became shallow, my fingers skimming the hem of my dress, the heat between my legs becoming a slow, aching pulse. Just like that, I murmured, my voice low, encouraging. Take your time with her. He did. His lips pressed lower, trailing along her skin, his hands steady as he guided her back against the mattress. She melted beneath him, a soft sigh escaping her lips, her fingers weaving into his hair. I dragged my nails lightly over my exposed thigh, the tingling sensation sending another wave of need through me. She was beautiful, so was he, and together they were something even more intoxicating. I traced slow, lazy circles against the sensitive skin beneath my dress, teasing myself, matching the rhythm of their movements. My husband's hands slid lower, drawing a sharp inhale from her lips. Her fingers dug into his shoulders, her body trembling beneath his touch. I bit my lip, my breathing uneven, watching as she surrendered to him. Do you like the way he touches you? I asked, my voice smooth and teasing. She didn't answer with words, but the way her breath hitched, the way she clung to him, was enough. The sounds filled the space, the slow, deliberate movements, the heat radiating between them, I had thought I could just sit there, just watch, just enjoy. But as the tension tightened, as the pleasure built, I realized something else. I was getting restless. I wasn't sure how much longer I could stay on the sidelines. I was burning. The warmth in my body had built too high. The tension wound too tight. Every glance, every breath, every soft sound made it harder to stay on the sidelines. And I didn't want to anymore. I rose from the chair, stepping closer, letting my fingertips graze along my husband's arm. His breath hitched, his gaze flicking to mine, deep and unreadable. She turned too, her expression caught between hesitation and something else. Something eager. I smiled slowly, knowing. "Move up," I murmured, brushing my fingers through his hair, guiding him back against the pillows. He obeyed without question, his chest rising and falling heavily, his body tense beneath my touch. Then I turned to her. "Come here," I said softly, my voice thick with warmth and promise. She hesitated, her breath uneven, but then she followed. She shifted into place, settling into him, her body molding against his as he steadied her, his hands firm at her sides. I watched, taking in the way they moved together, the silent communication between them, the heat humming between all of us. Then I climbed onto the bed, positioning myself above him. My hands settled at his shoulders. His breath was warm, sending a shiver up my spine. I leaned forward, my hands brushing against her arms, steadying her, guiding her. "Just like that," I whispered against her lips, tilting her chin toward me. "Let me help you." She exhaled sharply as I pressed my mouth to hers, tasting the heat still lingering on her skin. She melted into me, her fingers curling at my waist, letting me take control, letting me lead. I deepened the kiss, my hands sliding to her sides, helping her find the rhythm, setting the pace. She followed my lead, her body moving in sync with mine, our breaths tangling together. Below me, my husband groaned, his fingers pressing into my back as he pulled me closer. A sharp wave of warmth shot through me, making me gasp against her lips. I tangled my fingers in her hair, tilting her head to deepen the kiss. The softness of her skin, the way her body reacted beneath my hands, only made the fire inside me burn hotter. I could feel the tension building, all of us teetering on the edge, the anticipation tightening with every movement, every touch, every sound. Her breath turned unsteady, her grip tightening on me. My husband's hands flexed at my sides, his body tensing beneath us. It was overwhelming. The energy coiled sharp and consuming, until finally it unraveled. A rush of warmth spread through me, my body trembling, my breath catching in short, broken gasps. I felt them tense around me, the weight of the moment pressing into all of us, filling the room with lingering heat and satisfaction. For a long moment, none of us moved. The air was thick with warmth, our bodies tangled, our breaths uneven. Then I collapsed onto the bed, stretching lazily, a slow, satisfied smile curving my lips. She let out a shaky laugh, brushing her fingers through her tousled hair. My husband exhaled deeply, his arm draping over my stomach, his grip possessive, even in the aftermath. I turned my head, glancing between them, my heart still racing. I had wanted to give her something to help her, but I hadn't expected just how much I would enjoy it myself. And I wasn't sure I wanted this to be the last time. The morning light filtered through the curtains, casting a warm glow over the tangled sheets and the slow rise and fall of steady breaths. I stretched lazily, my body still humming with the remnants of the night before. Beside me, my husband stirred, his arm draped possessively over my waist. On the other side, she shifted, her fingers brushing absent-mindedly against my skin. There was no awkwardness, no regret, just a quiet, lingering warmth that settled deep in my bones. I turned my head, glancing between them, a knowing smile playing at my lips. Last night had been about her, about giving her something she needed, but now I knew better. I had enjoyed this just as much, maybe even more. And as I traced lazy circles against my husband's chest, I knew one thing for certain. This wouldn't be the last time. I told myself it was just for her, just a way to help. But now I'm not so sure. Is this something only the bold would dare to try? Or do some secrets belong in the dark? Let me know what you think in the comments. I want to hear every perspective. And if you enjoyed this, subscribe, and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what's next. See you soon. What happens when an innocent invitation turns into a night that changes everything about desire? Picture stepping into a realm where friendship, closeness, and hidden fantasies collide in one unforgettable instant. This isn't just a tale, it's a voyage into the unknown, where a single choice can unravel all that you thought you understood about connection. Before I share the night that altered everything, pause. If you've ever felt desire blur the boundaries of possibility, if you're drawn to stories that push limits, click subscribe. Some moments are too powerful to keep quiet. It began with a simple invitation. James, my old friend, texted me about an impromptu gathering at his penthouse. Just some drinks and conversation, he said. You'll love it. I wasn't sure if I wanted to go, but James had a way of making everything sound irresistible. Plus, after a long week, I figured a distraction wouldn't hurt. When I stepped into the elevator heading straight to his apartment, I had no idea my world was about to be turned upside down. James greeted me at the door, as charming as ever. His warm smile, his hand on my back as he ushered me inside. It all felt so naturally effortless. He always knew how to make me feel at ease, like I belonged. Perfect timing, he said, handing me a glass of whiskey, just the right amount of ice. Let me introduce you to my friends. The penthouse was as impressive as always, with floor-to-ceiling windows framing the sparkling city lights, and the smooth sounds of jazz filled the air. James looked the part of sophistication, dressed in a dark suit, collar open, that playful smirk suggesting he was in on a secret. Then I met Victor. He was leaning against the sleek marble bar, his relaxed posture and confident grin pulling everyone's attention. He had this raw, magnetic energy, an undeniable presence that commanded focus without any effort. Then there was Robert, quiet and observant. His intense gaze seemed to see straight through me. He didn't say much at first, but his calm demeanor made him all the more captivating. The four of us fell into a natural rhythm, talking, laughing, glasses clinking. James lit up the room, telling stories that had us in stitches. Victor added his own witty remarks, his deep, gravelly voice giving weight to his words, while Robert mostly listened, occasionally chiming in with perfectly timed comments that kept us hanging on every word. I couldn't deny the energy in the room. It wasn't just the whiskey warming me from within. It was them. Each one of them, in their own way, seemed to draw me closer. At some point, the conversation took a playful turn. James leaned forward, a mischievous sparkle in his eyes. "All right," he said, setting his glass down. "Let's make this interesting. A little game of truth. No lies, no holding back." Victor raised an eyebrow. "Dangerous," he said, smirking. "Exactly," James replied. "I'll start. What's the most daring thing you've ever done?" The answers were amusing. Victor once snuck into a concert. Robert admitted he'd taken an impulsive trip to Europe. When it was my turn, all eyes were on me. I laughed nervously, taking a sip of my drink. "I'm not sure I've done anything that daring," I said. Victor's grin widened. "You seem like you've got it in you." James leaned in closer. "We could change that tonight." The atmosphere in the room shifted, charged with something I couldn't quite place. Then James asked the question that changed everything. "If you could spend the night with anyone here, who would it be?" My heart raced as their eyes fixed on me. I knew they were teasing, but the intensity in their gazes made it clear they were expecting an answer. Instead of picking, I found myself joking, "Why not all three?" It was meant as a laugh, or at least that's what I told myself. But the way they looked at me after that made it clear they were all thinking the same thing. James was the first to move. He stepped closer, brushing his hand against mine, taking my glass and setting it on the table. "You always did know how to steal the spotlight," he said softly, his voice low and smooth. His hand lingered on mine, and when he tilted his head, his lips met mine in a slow, deliberate kiss. It was warm, inviting, and just a little teasing, as if he were testing the waters. My breath caught as his other hand slid to the small of my back, pulling me closer. Then I felt Victor behind me. His presence was undeniable. He placed his hands on my hips, his touch firm but patient. "Don't think you're getting all the attention," he murmured into my ear before trailing kisses down my neck. James's hands slid over my hips, while Victor's warm palms gripped my waist, grounding me. They exchanged a knowing look over my shoulder. Their touches were different, yet complementary, flooding my senses. Robert stood in front of me, his steady gaze a mix of admiration and desire. He reached out, tracing a slow line from my collarbone to my jaw. His touch was firm yet gentle, like he wanted to savor the moment. Victor's lips found my shoulder, and I felt the contrast between his stubble and the softness of his kiss. His hands moved confidently, finding the zipper of my dress. The fabric gave way under his touch, sliding down my body in a whisper of silk. I stood there for a moment, the cool air brushing against my bare skin, but it didn't last long. James's hands skimmed the sides of my thighs, his lips pressing gentle, feather-like kisses along the curve of my neck. "You're beautiful," he murmured, his voice deep and raspy. Robert moved closer, his hands gliding along my arms, his lips taking mine again, this time It was deeper, slower. His kiss made my knees weak, and I leaned into him instinctively, gripping his shoulders for support. Behind me, Victor chuckled softly, guiding me gently but insistently toward the couch. "Let's make you comfortable," he said, his voice full of promise. As they lowered me onto the plush cushions, I felt a mix of anticipation and surrender. Victor knelt beside me, his hands tracing the curve of my waist, sending a shiver through me. James moved behind me, his presence steady as his hands slid to my lower back. Robert was beside me, his eyes locked on mine as he reached for the strap of my bra. His fingers brushed my skin as he slid it down slowly, his movements deliberate, as if savoring each moment. James leaned in from behind, his lips grazing my ear. "You're incredible," he whispered, his voice barely a murmur. Victor's hands found the clasp, and in one smooth motion, the final barrier fell away. I gasped at the sensation of their hands exploring me, each touch deliberate, reverent, as if they were memorizing every inch of my skin. Robert kissed me again, his lips soft yet insistent as his hands moved lower. His touch was warm and grounding, while Victor's was rougher, more impatient. James's fingers traced patterns along my back, soothing yet electrifying. Victor's lips found my collarbone, and his hands gripped my hips, guiding me onto his lap. His strength was undeniable, and I felt a deep pull as he positioned me exactly where he wanted me. Robert's hands steadied me, his eyes dark with intensity as he leaned in, his lips finding mine again. James moved to the side, his hands brushing over my thighs, his lips grazing my neck. "You're everything I imagined," he whispered. They each took their time, each bringing a different energy. Victor's confident dominance, Robert's slow, steady affection, and James's playful teasing. I felt every touch, every kiss, every whispered word with an intensity that left me breathless. Victor's hands guided my movements, his grip firm yet gentle as Robert leaned down, his lips brushing over my shoulder. James's fingers interlaced with mine, his steady presence anchoring me as I gave myself over to the moment. And then it happened, a moment so raw, so overwhelming, it left me gasping. My body trembled under their combined touch. It was more than passion. It was an explosion of connection, a symphony of sensation that left me breathless and completely undone. The night unfolded in a blur of movement and sensation. Their touches, their words, the way they kept me at the center of their focus. It wasn't just physical, it was an unspoken connection, an unyielding energy flowing between us. Hours later, we lay tangled on the couch, the city lights casting a soft glow over us. Victor leaned back, his arm draped over me, breathing steady and deep. Robert was on the other side, his fingers tracing patterns on my arm. He glanced at me with a soft smile, his expression a mix of admiration and satisfaction. James sat at the edge of the couch, his hand resting on my leg as he looked out at the skyline. "That was worth the wait," he said, breaking the silence. Victor chuckled, his voice low and warm. "I think we'd all agree on that." I smiled, my chest still rising and falling with the aftershocks of everything that had just happened. "I don't think I've ever had a night like this," I admitted softly. Robert leaned down, pressing a gentle kiss to my temple. "You deserved it," he said simply, his voice filled with sincerity that made my heart ache in the best way. The night faded into soft laughter and quiet conversation. The four of us basked in the glow of the connection we'd shared. It was more than just passion. It was a moment that would stay with me forever, a story I'd replay in my mind for years to come. Your turn. Have you ever had a night that completely transformed you? A moment so raw, so powerful that it changed everything? Share your most daring, most vulnerable story in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, smash that like button, hit subscribe, and let's keep these real, unfiltered conversations going. Your truth might be the story that sets someone else free.